Hi, I'm Michelle the Irritable Vegan. I'm here to share my vegan low FODMAP story and hopefully take some of the BS out of IBS. Now today we're going to be dealing with that weird and wonderful trending ingredient, jackfruit. We're going to talk all about how to prepare it, what the hell to do with it, and if it's worth the effort and the hype. So if that's something you're interested in, stay tuned. So first things first, up to now, Monash have not tested or approved jackfruit on the FODMAP diet. So I don't recommend at this point that you try it out during your elimination phase, but it's got such a distinctive texture and it really is such a versatile ingredient that it's definitely going to be worth experimenting with once you reach your personalised phase of the diet. So as a fellow vegan, or even just somebody that's interested in including more plants in your diet, I very much doubt that you've made it here to 2019 without at least seeing one recipe that includes jackfruit, or without hearing that it's the next big thing. So in all honesty, I'm pretty late to the jackfruit craze, and that's partly because it's an ingredient that I find quite difficult to get hold of, and I wasn't really prepared to go to the effort or the expense of buying it online, only to find out that it's something that I don't particularly like, or that it didn't particularly agree with my tummy. So that being said, that means that in the time that jackfruit has become a craze, I've seen tons of recipes for it before I ever actually got my hands on any myself. So then how does it live up to the hype? So one of the first things I wanted to talk about, and it is the biggest myth about jackfruit that I just want to bust wide open, and that is that jackfruit tastes like pulled pork. No. Now guaranteed, it has been at least 4 years since my last taste of pulled pork, but I can tell you in all honesty, in my opinion, it actually tastes nothing like pulled pork straight from the tin. In fact, it's actually incredibly bland. Now just before this puts you off completely, that blandness, or really rather that neutral flavour, actually makes it a really versatile ingredient, because when you lavish a little bit of time and attention on it, it really can take on the flavour profile of whatever it is you're cooking it with and however it is you want it to taste. Now don't get me wrong, I completely understand where this comparison is coming from in terms of the texture of jackfruit. Now it's really unlike anything of plant origin that I've certainly come across, and if somebody was to offer me a taste test of jackfruit without me knowing what it was or where it came from, I'd probably politely decline, because I'd be much more likely to think that it came from animal origin rather than from plant origin. It can be easily flaked or shredded and pulled apart to produce quite a stringy, meaty texture, very similar to pulled pork, but the actual fruit itself really needs to be paired with all the usual types of flavourings, the herbs, the spices and the other ingredients that you would generally pair with pork to come up with that kind of smoky, barbecue, tomatoey, pulled pork flavour. So as often happens when people compare an animal-based meal to a plant-based meal, what they're actually doing is they're interpreting all the usual flavours and seasonings that surround that meal, not really the specific ingredient itself. So what I'm trying to say is that pulled pork doesn't taste like pulled pork until it's been marinated and cooked in certain herbs and spices to bring out that barbecue smoky flavour profile, and that's exactly the same when using jackfruit. So I really don't want tons of new vegans to go rushing out and stocking up on tins and tins of jackfruit, opening the can enthusiastically, only to be left with this neutral, bland, chewy disappointment of a fruit and wondering what on earth everybody is talking about. You really do need to take a little bit of time and a little bit of care to give it that flavour profile, but once you do, I promise you won't be disappointed. Now it's very individual to each of us whether the idea of something very convincingly meaty in texture completely grosses you out or intrigues you. But either way, if we've not yet put you off about the convincing texture and the very, very bland flavour, then let's get into how to prepare it properly. Cue the video. So the first thing we need to know is that the jackfruit used in savoury recipes is young green jackfruit tinned in either water or brine. Jackfruit is also sold in syrup, and this is absolutely not the one that you want, so always double check. It's a very low fat ingredient which is high in fibre but very low in protein, so it really needs to be paired with other protein rich foods if you're eating it as a main meal or on a regular basis. The tinned jackfruit needs to be drained and rinsed thoroughly before use. And a vital step that a lot of recipes seem to leave out is properly squeezing and draining as much water out of it as possible. You can see here how much water the flesh actually holds, and all of that is going to drastically dilute the final flavour if we don't get rid of it. You can see that once it's properly drained, we're left with a meaty flesh that could convincingly pass for tuna, chicken or pork. The jackfruit's made up of fibrous, flaky flesh attached to a firmer core. Now the brand of jackfruit that I've been buying, the core can usually be broken up by hand, but I have read that sometimes it requires cutting into slices or shredding with a knife and fork. Now something worth pointing out is that the core often contains a seed encased inside a seed pod, both of which are edible. I personally prefer to use my hands to break the core apart and discard these because quite frankly the rubbery texture of the seed pod and the popping sensation when you bite into the seed really gives me the heebie-jeebies. I definitely recommend this as neither the seed or the pod add anything to the overall flavour, but if you find that you're not offended by it or you don't want to waste any of the jackfruit, then by all means keep them in. Now this actual preparation of the jackfruit can seem a bit fiddly, but once you've done it a few times, you know what you're looking for, you know what you're doing. It really only takes a couple of minutes from start to finish. And here's what the separated seeds and pods look like. And honestly, there's not an excessive amount of waste overall, but it's just down to personal preference as to whether you want to eat the seeds and pods or not. So what do you think? Is it something that you're going to experiment with during your personalised phase, or is it just not for you? Either way, I'd really love to hear what you think in the comments below, and I'd also love it if you could share your personal jackfruit recipes. I've managed to find it in Aldi for a really good price, so I've actually stockpiled it. So my kitchen at the moment is full of jackfruit. So I'd really love to hear your personal tried and tested recipes for it. Leave them in the comments below so we can share them with the whole FODMAP family. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye! The full recipe for the pulled jackfruit tacos featured earlier in the video can be found in Feast Without FODMAPs. You'll find it at the link in the description box below.